Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited to have Sandy Michelman on the show today. He is the chairman and co-founder of Michelman and Robinson, law firm based in Los Angeles, but with offices in New York and London, and also chairman of FlyHouse, which we'll get into. Super exciting. So, a strong litigation lawyer, co-founder of a firm, and also an entrepreneur as well. So, Sandy, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you.
Thank you. Excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, well, maybe let's just kind of get into it. Maybe just a little bit of your origin story, kind of where you came from, how you came to be who you are, and what you're doing today.
Sure. I mean, I'll start with a little bit of my personal background, and don't worry, I'm not going to go with starting at 6 years old, so I'll keep it really short. Um, I grew up in Southern California in Los Angeles from parents that came from Detroit, my father, and Brooklyn, my mother. And they both moved to LA very young in their lives, which is pretty unique for Los Angeles. So I always joke it's me and like four other people that are from Los Angeles. And in our family, it was always about education and doing right and making sure that you're keeping your head down and not taking anything for granted. And during that journey, I went through and, pretty early on decided I wanted to be a lawyer. I come from a family, littered with lawyers. My grandfather was a lawyer, and I just found it intriguing, not just the puzzle part of it, like solving problems, but it was solving problems for people. The impact that you can have is pretty dramatic. And I saw that at an early young age, and I really, really wanted to pursue that. And, as I was going through life, I wish I could go back to my younger self and say, slow down there, buddy. Like I wanted to get to law school. I wanted to practice. And so I eventually went through, went to college, went to law school, and then I came out. And then in that process, I was offered a job by a firm in Los Angeles, and it was about the week before I was supposed to start. And somebody called me up and said, "Hey, I got your resume. Would you like to come on in?" And it was 10:30. I was like on Monday, sleeping. I knew like this was like the last week before it all kicked in. And I said no, and he eventually said, "Look, what do you have to lose?" I roll into the office, never heard of this place, never heard of the particular practice area of law. And it was a small boutique law offices that did professional liability, regulatory litigation, and corporate light. And it was a great speech to give to a young, bright-eyed, ambitious, just brand new lawyer saying, look, you don't want to be stuck doing memos. You don't want to be stuck doing all this other stuff. Instead, you want a combination of the training and the practical. And going to a bigger firm, it's going to be a longer journey. And so I was intrigued, and I was waiting for the other shoe to drop because there's always another shoe. And the other shoe was the compensation was half of what it was going to be starting the next week.
Sure.
And I was engaged to my wife back then, who I met in law school. She's also a lawyer. And I went home and I said, you know what? I could always get another job. I think it's worth getting that experience. So I turned down the other job, started at this place, and it was a hit the ground running. It was like thrown into the trenches. The deep end is an understatement. It was like there was no bottom, trying cases and just trying to figure it all out. And it was exciting. But what I realized during that couple of years was that, to be successful in law, you really have to figure out and harness what's your strength, what's your passion. And I mean by strength, I mean passion. And I tie passion to skill, right? I always joke there's a lot of passionate unemployed actors, right? But you gotta have skill tied to it, right? It's not to suggest that those who haven't been discovered yet aren't going to be discovered. I just, that's kind of my footnote playing lawyer. And so I really realized that while I liked the corporate side of it, and this is before computers today, it was very laborious. I really liked going in on litigation because of the immediacy of how you can help people. I really, really enjoyed that. And so I started getting more and more involved. But during that process, and I also realized, look, I've got to be, fully focused. I mean, it's just stuff doesn't come your way. You got to search it out. And so it was really 24/7, hitting it pretty hard, trying to figure things out. If I didn't know the answer, I would go and I'd research it. It's a brand new lawyer. And then a little bit into the job, the senior partner came over and said, you know what, I've decided I'm going to retire. And I'm thinking, wait, what happened to one day this will all be mind speech?
Yes.
And so I don't really believe in victims, right? You got to make your own destiny. So I figured I had three outcomes: ride the wave. That wave looks like it was about to crest. Get another job or bring in business. And when I thought about it, I said, you know what, I'm going to call up, some of the people I know in town and see about getting another job. And it was interesting because while I had the opportunities, it was, you're a younger lawyer, you're going to be stuck doing memos. And I'm thinking, geez, by this time I was fortunate because I had a tremendous amount of arbitrations and trials already.
Sure.
And while I don't think I was fully trained, I was certainly, a little bit more advanced in my years just because of the experiences I had. And so I figured, all right, I'll just bring in business. And I quickly started bringing in business to the point I became the largest rainmaker in this small boutique firm.
Okay.
To which the senior partner said, "Guess what? I'm not going to retire so much." And I said, well, if that's the case, I think we should talk about partnership. And I became partner, and it became a partnership at a very young age. And then from there, as things were starting to accelerate, and I brought over Mark Robinson, who was working at another firm because I needed help. I was finding myself just dissatisfied, which is interesting because you would think I was in my 20s. This is now 29 years old. You'd think, you have the world in front of you. I have a blossoming career. I'm, doing all the things that one would love to do at, any age, quite honestly. I'm married, just bought my first house. My wife's pregnant with our oldest son, who just turned 25 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And I wake up, I go to the office, I turn the door, and I just look around going, I'm not going to be here in 30 years. So what am I doing here now? I can't do it. So I turned to Mark Robinson, and it's 10:30. And I said, Mark, we should go get some lunch or coffee. He's like, well, I already had coffee and it's too early for lunch. I'm like, buddy, I want to talk to you. And so we got up and we went and we talked. I said, look, I'm leaving. I'm going to leave in 2 weeks. I don't know what I'm doing or where I'm going, but I know for every day that I'm here, I'm losing time and I'm not satisfied. So in 15 minutes, we decided we were going to do our own law firm, Michelman Robinson. It was going to be a work hard, play hard mentality with the number one drive being put client interests first. That was the number one thing. How do we provide the best legal services? Meaning not winning or losing in trial or getting the best deal on a close. Meaning when thinking about legal services, what is the commercial end for the client? So if I'm in litigation, right, and I'm a plaintiff or a defendant, that's not the company's, that's not their product. Put aside insurance for a second. That's not what they do.
Right.
That's usually a dispute in a commercial setting, and litigation is just a tool to a commercial end. So what is the commercial end we're looking for the client? And if we kept that as our, North Star, that would give us the ability to say, okay, we can differentiate ourselves because we're not litigating to show that we're a better lawyer. We're litigating on behalf of your interest to show a better outcome for your business or you personally. And then the other one was, I noticed that in law firms, there's pretty much misalignment in what I'll call the old school way of thinking. I'll give a quick example. Lawyers are often charging by the passage of time. On the first year, it's one rate, second year, it's another rate, so forth and so on. But under what notion is it that you take a class of 20 lawyers and you put them as a first year, that they're all identical? Right. Some will drag behind and some will go forward. And they do compensation and hourly rates this way. And I looked at it and said, no, I think that should be like a league minimum. And so what we did is we said, look, we've all seen the 8th year lawyer that keeps repeating their 4th year. Well, that's not really fair for clients because they're getting charged something of disproportionate value. The inverse is true. How about the 4th year lawyer who exceeds to an 8th year level? It's not fair for the firm. So we changed that. We don't do it we decided we were going to change it, and we did. We're not going to do it by years. We're going to do it by levels. And we do it by skill assessment. The other thing we did is we tied the amount we charge to the skill, not the passage of time. So by doing it this way, the clients are always getting a fair trade. And then we decided we are going to put an exorbitant amount into training. That's critical to us because that's what we do, right? We're paid for our critical thinking. So we started the firm on June 1st, 1999. I left 2 weeks to the day. We took temporary space until we could build it out. I mean, it was so fast. And one of the large regulatory matters in the country came out. It was all over TV, survival insurance. And the client came to me and asked me if I would try the case. And I said, I don't have any employees yet. It's kind of hard to try a case this big. And he said, well, you at least monitor this other firm. I said, sure, which I did. And then eventually that firm got fired. I said, fine, I'll do it, but you gotta let me do it my way. And we ultimately won the case, which sent shockwaves through the industry. But in that process, what we ended up seeing was a lot of the client support that I had previously was overwhelming. I mean, they just came on over and said, how can we help you start the firm? We love what you're doing. Is there anything you need? And as we were starting to grow, I started getting demands from different parts of the country. And so we created what we call gaps in needs. Our growth model is not by a head count, but it's by a gap, some practice area missing or a need, something that we're losing on value that we should capture for the betterment of the firm. We opened up Orange County, California, then San Francisco, then New York, then Chicago, Dallas, Houston, and now we're going international.
Yeah.
And that's the not so short version of my origin story.
No, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So how do you talk about doing skills assessments to set those levels? How do you go about doing that with your lawyers?
Yeah, so when I came out of law, and I think I share the story with probably most lawyers, I always say my license is no different than that of somebody who just got licensed yesterday. The only difference, other than from a regulatory perspective, right, it's the same, is I just have more experience. But it's not viewed that way. You get out of law school, you get a job at a law firm, and think about a pyramid. Everybody assumes you have this great foundation and you know the law, right? It's just this untrained raw talent. And they throw you into the mix. And then you sort of have to survive up. Either you get a partner you like, maybe you get an industry you like, maybe you transfer to an industry you like, practice area, and then you kind of survive. And I looked at that saying, well, that is probably the least successful model I've seen. And I'm a data kind of geek. I love numbers. And so I kind of broke it down. I said, why don't we invert the pyramid, right? So why don't we look at it and say what a level one, because that's what we call them. And we have a chart, we call it objective standards. And we do through Michelman Robinson University, we publish these out, and it's a guideline of every level, what skills we want you to perfect. So I'll use by way of example, litigation. There's something called a motion for summary judgment. And it's a trial by paper. There's no disputed fact. The judge can decide it. Judge decides law, jury decides disputed facts. And what I came up with was go write a summary judgment motion. And I remember calling up my friend saying, like, how do you do this? Like, here's some forms. Like, it'd be like, 10,000 hours, if you will, on something that shouldn't be that much. We inverted it. We said, no, first thing we want you to do is learn the law regarding, let's say, a summary judgment. We want you to learn the standards. We want to learn the basics. Once you master that, then we want you to learn the procedural side. Once you master that, then we want you to learn what's called a separate statement. Then we want you to learn the strategy, so forth and so on. So if you think about an inverted pyramid, instead what I'm doing is I'm taking and building blocks so that when you get to the top, you actually have that experience, but most importantly, the confidence, because you've been trained step by step. Right. That's one concept. The other concept is if you give somebody a roadmap, and especially lawyers because they don't want to make a partner, if you give them a roadmap and say, this is your roadmap to either being a partner, but most importantly, being a talented lawyer. I don't care if it's litigation, regulatory, corporate. Most of the people will look at this and say, this is fantastic because I know what I need to do, which removes the fear, gives you confidence, and gives you a roadmap. They actually accelerate in their training a lot faster for another reason. Our levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth and so on, are not lockstep. So if you master 1 and 2 in your first year, you can go to 3, which comes with that more compensation because they're correlated to compensation. And so we do that. The other thing we do is we have Michelman Robinson University, where we do peer training as well as we bring outside resources. I'll give you an example. We have something called our TAP program and our CAP program. TAP is trial advocacy program. CAP is corporate advocacy program. TAP, what we did is we take a real case that we had, that we tried. We create two files, not plaintiff and defendant. We have two teams. They have mentors and coaches. And one of the partners will play the judge, one will play the discovery judge or the magistrate. This happens to be a case that I tried in 2021, and it was the end of Zoom, or the end of COVID, so it was all on Zoom, which is nice.
Yes.
So we locked down the system. We have two teams, and we didn't tell anybody who's plaintiff or defendant. That's a strategy call. And most people don't think about that. And so this case was a case where a franchisee made a claim against the franchisor. We represented the franchisor. Litigation had not yet been filed. And what ended up happening was there was this dispute, and we jumped in and we handled it. Strategically, I decided to become the plaintiff. Hopefully, nobody's going to look at this because this is still going on right now. This is our active TAP program. But we gave two files. And so far, it was the other way. The plaintiffs are the plaintiffs and the defendants are the defendants, and they're going through that routine. And we're doing normal law in motion, the whole bit. Except, of course, for settlement, because that would kill the problem. That would kill the whole purpose of a trial program. When it's all done, I step out and we have a retired judge who comes in. We have two juries that we bring in, and we actually try the case, videotape deliberations, and then we go through and break it down step by step on training them so they have the context to do it. And then we show them the video of how the trial went, and then we teach them strategically. Those are the type of steps that we do, because then when you have that context and you have that confidence, it's a lot better when you walk into a courtroom knowing, okay, I've done this before. I can do this. And that's how we do our training.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I did make the joke to our managing partner. I said, if you give me sanction, I happen to be the judge on this one. I said, if you give me sanction rights, I can make it profitable.
That's amazing. How about, we do a lot of work with law firms, and you talk about just lawyers in the family. My dad's a lawyer. I was practiced for a number of years before launching our firm. And so we've been in and talked to a lot of firms. I've yet to hear a firm that trains their trial lawyers, their litigators that way. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. And on this case, I had my first appearance by the other side, and it's all by Zoom because we have offices all around.
Yeah.
And it was a motion to dismiss, of course, like one would think. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, okay, I could see the writing, where it's got to be tweaked. I'll give that review at the end. We do an hour of argument and then an hour of review.
Okay.
And the argument by the plaintiff and the defendant was so sharp, was so good. And afterwards, I called up one of my partners and I said, what year are they? I mean, there's no exaggeration of the story. And she said, one's a second year, one's a first year. I was blown away. I was blown away. And I think the reason for that is the way the teams are set up is you have those who have already gone through the program are mentors and coaches all the way down. And they're going through this process of, in a safe environment, teaching each other and testing in a way that it's a little bit de-stressed or frictionless. Because in their mind, as a first-year lawyer, it's not like, if I make a mistake, did I really harm the client? Here it's no. Stretch, try new arguments. And so that's why we really, really like it. I've been so impressed with the talent, so impressed with the outcome of this program.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How about the converse? Like on the client side, how do you talked about billing clients based on those levels? How do you, I can figure out how you do it, but how do you message that to the client? Or don't you? Or how does that work?
No, we do. We also teach lawyers how to market. We call it MCDP, Marketing Client Development Program. Lots of training. When it comes to clients, I'm very overt about it. We're a very transparent firm, internally and externally. No reason not to be. One, I think it's the right thing to do. But two, this is a benefit to the client. We tell them, look, this is how our billing works. And on top of it, what we also do in our objective standards, that pyramid with the skills base, we also tell the lawyers, we only want you doing what's in that band. We don't want a junior partner doing the senior associate work. Why? It's no different than having the wrong rate. You have the wrong skill set, too advanced, doing something that's junior. It's not fair for the client. That's one. But two, you're stripping the senior associate of that training. And we tell the clients completely, this is exactly how we're doing it. And they really like it. It resonates with them. Do we always get it right? No, and we're not a perfect place like, all businesses, but we
Sure.
strive to be perfect.
Yeah. How about in any other ways that you ensure the ongoing growth and development of the attorneys in the firm?
So on the legal side, that's the training programs. For the mentorship, I always think it's my responsibility to just have them in the room. Wherever I'm at, I try to get them in the room. Listen, just be there, client meetings. It doesn't make a difference. That's one component. The other one is years ago in Delaware, there was a handful of judges who said, look, I don't want the senior partners arguing. I want the juniors. I thought that was great. So I just ripped off the form that the judge had issued. And around the country, we just started submitting these forms. And it was, we're going to let this lawyer argue. We'll be there in case there's a stumble because we still have client interests. Judges loved it. Lawyers loved it.
Yeah.
It actually turned out strategically to be great because we had a little bit more latitude on the argument. And then we can do a tap in, tap out if we saw something. But then we started doing this in mediation, which is really good because it's more informal. And so the mediators, I had one mediation recently, and the mediator I've known forever, a fantastic former federal judge, turned to me and said, Sandy, I don't want to hear you talk on this Zoom. And I said, but wait a minute. She said, no. This is going to be total training. If there's going to be a problem, it's mediation. Don't worry about it. And it was great. I will footnote, I couldn't keep quiet, just who I am. I did have to jump in every once in a while. The other one is we also, nothing in the firm is mandated. I don't think you can mandate affinity or desire or ambition. So we have a lot of programs that go beyond just legal training. So a program we started over a decade ago is called MCDP. It's Marketing and Client Development Program. And it's something I developed through my experience at Harvard Business School. And it goes back about 20 years ago, 2004. There's a gentleman by the name of Joe Pines, and he writes about the experience economy and different ways to get engagement. And I read both his books, and he came to us at a lunch we were having outside the firm. And I went up to him and said, Joe, I got to ask you, in both your books, you only have 2 lines regarding law firms. Why is that? And he said, well, everything's confidential. We don't really have any visibility. I'm like, that's a good point. And then over the next, I don't know, basically decade, I was obsessed with trying to figure out what he was teaching in his books. How does that apply to law? And I was able to create something that I'm very, very proud of called Marketing and Client Development. Marketing is how do I bring in business? Client development is how do I get the second file? So a lot of lawyers will get the first file, but never get the second file, and they don't know why. And we teach it once a year. And it's a 2-day program that follows a business case format. And it takes a lawyer. You don't know what year he is because we don't think that's really relevant. And it walks them through the value proposition of anybody who buys goods or services. And then how do you focus that on professional services? And it demystifies some of the things that people are always struggling with. By way of example, when I meet a lawyer from big law who says, I want to leave big law and I want to go to a boutique, a midsize, or even a different big law because my rate's too high here and it's impairing my ability to bring in business. That's actually not correct. What the market is saying is your brand is not known, either for being a strong lawyer or an industry. And the value trade there is not matching the expectations to the buy. And so it's called going from skeptic, prospect, buyer. And as a result, when I hear that, I say, well, no, it doesn't matter which firm you go to, you have to increase your brand, your marketing. So as we like to say, the marketing sets your rate, not the market. So if you think about it through that lens, you start to realize, well, geez, I can control my outcome on marketing. I can make these changes. Another example is discounting. People come in and say, hey, I want a discount. Well, a discount's just an admission that you've either made a mistake post-retention. It's an apology. That's all it is. You're on American Airlines and they lose your bag and they give you a drink ticket. It's just an apology.
Yeah.
Or pre-retention, when somebody says, I want a discount, what they're saying is, I don't have enough information to fully agree with the price you're charging me. I want a discount. And they even say, I'll give you a bonus in the back end if you succeed. What they're saying is they're trying to adjust value because they don't really know enough about you. And so we give them steps on how to walk into that conversation where they already know about you. And those are some of the skills that we teach. And then once you get the first case, what do you do to continue to be the trusted advisor? There's one step above that, which is called going from buyer to apostle. And we're constantly teaching how to do that, which I'll give the punchline is most lawyers like to report. We have a motion coming up, and this is what's, what the motion is. That's reporting versus inclusion. We have a motion coming up. This is what your business issue is that we're addressing in this lawsuit, ways to explain it. This is how we're going to handle it through this motion, the tool, the commercial end. Here's why we're going to do it. Step 3. Step 4 is what is your thoughts and insights to this? So now you've built it together. And the last one is agreement. Inclusion. If you think about it that way, you've built it together and you've done it in a professional, competent way. Versus sometimes I've seen lawyers who just report, or they'll say, oh, we had a motion yesterday, we lost it, or we won. Oh, motion's due in tomorrow. You want to take a quick review? That's not inclusion.
Right.
That's reporting and can be a little bit of an insult. The other thing is, we always tell lawyers, our lawyers as we're training them, you can't be emotional. That's not our job. I always say, and you can't have judgment. Those are the two things. And 2 lines I use, I don't know if they're appropriate or not, but I use them, which is I don't have any judgment in what my client does. It's not my role. I don't care if you're the second shooter on the grassy knoll. My job, if I take your case, is to zealously represent you. So you got to think about it that way. The other thing I say on the emotion side is I can't have emotion, because if I'm doing that, I'm doing you a disfavor. Imagine you walk in to your doctor and he's crying holding the x-rays. How comfortable are you going to feel?
Right.
So we train the lawyers to think about that as well. So the client services, it's a service business, as well as the technical and strategic skills.
That's fantastic.
It's fun. It's fun. Yeah. And I can tell you, I really enjoy the training side of it, because as you're going through and training, you're also learning. There's nothing static, right? New things pop up, especially with AI, with, COVID, and a new way of doing trials by Zoom. That was a new one for me.
Right.
I got to learn the disadvantages and advantages pretty quickly. I'll tell you, one of the great advantages was that as we were sitting there, the witnesses aren't supposed to have notes or anything in front of them. And one of the witnesses had a reflecting window in back, and I could see that opposing counsel was popping up notes on the computer screen.
Oh, geez.
Which is great. Hey, Your Honor, do you see this too?
Oh, how about just building culture and core values in the firm? How have you been mindful and intentional about that?
Well, we always say what makes us successful isn't bringing in the business. It isn't our hourly rates. It isn't all of that. It's culture. That's what it is. And I take a very specific view on culture. People say work-life balance. I don't think that exists. It's a myth. Why? How do you have 50-50? Right. It's like, I've just never seen it. If it happens by chance. And I'm not even sure work-life balance is the right saying. So I call it a third. I live by the model of a third. A third family, a third work, and a third community, because I think that's important to get back to community. So, and it's not literally a third, and a third, kind of is always ever shifting. I say when one bucket gets too wide, you have to drop some tokens in the other 2 buckets and then reshift. It's like waiting. But I got to be authentic about it, right? So what I tell the lawyers is, look, I don't want you sitting behind your desk. I don't want you making the firm all encompassing. These firms that give these super bonuses at 2,500, 3,000 hours, I think is a complete disservice. Here's why. It's a global world. It's only going to get smaller. We're paid for our critical thinking. The matters that we handle require a greater worldview than that from that which doesn't exist behind your desk. So we tell our lawyers, get out in the world and be interesting. Go meet new people. I don't care if it's for better legal services or for bringing in business. It doesn't make a difference to us. And in fact, we used to have a program that if you bill too much, it's going to go against your compensation, and which is antithetical to law firms. We had somebody in our appellate department. This is got to be over a decade ago. She was the office security came to us and she kept sleeping in her office. She was billing about 260 to 270 hours a month. Most firms would like this would be a prized person.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking, well, you're rewarding somebody for working a lot. That's going to create bad outcomes at home and things of that nature.
Sure.
Maybe it's inefficiency. The efficient one who's more
Mhm.
productive is getting negatively reviewed because they're just not working, billing as many hours.
Yeah.
And I went to her and I said, look, you can't do this. It's not healthy. It's bad culture. And it was, I don't know if she was trying to be funny or cute. She said, then I'm going on strike. I'm only billing 230 hours. I said, I'm not going to say her name. I said, look, you're not getting the picture. She said, no, this is who I am. And this is what I want to do. And I enjoy sleeping in the office. And we asked her to leave the firm. We literally asked her to leave the firm. And the reason I share that is, it's tone at the top, mood in the middle. You got to lead with the sense of, we want people to have a very good professional career. We also want them to have a good home life. And we also believe in giving back in community. And we support it in every way. We have something we call firm fund. Any employee, I don't care if it's a lawyer or not, we try not to make those distinctions. If you're a group of 4 with or without spouses, you want to go to a sporting event, a concert, a trip, we don't really care. As long as there's 4 of you, we'll pay for it. And that's how we do it. And there's tons of examples. I guess the best way to give you an example of that is COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So when COVID was coming about, I was on the board of the Federal Reserve, and I was in Mexico on March 2nd. And we started getting a call saying, look, Mexico might shut down. We're not sure. And I went to my buddies who I was with, and I said, look, I got to get out of Mexico. I can't stay here. And I flew to New York. And to say it was a stressful time, I shouldn't say stressful. To say it was a busy time is better. It would be an understatement. I got the firm, clients, and stuff I'm trying to figure out at the Fed. And I go into Scarpetta in downtown with my wife. This is March 16th. And this is all the advisories. Now, it's a little hypocritical because I was there too, but I'm owning it. I walk in and I thought it'd be a table like spread out, the 6 feet or 8 feet, whatever it was. And it was packed. I said, no, we're not staying here. And I called somebody in DC. I said, this place is lighting up. And we flew to Los Angeles, where we stayed for COVID. And then, of course, the 16th was the lockdown. That was the 11th. 16th was the lockdown. And on March 25th, I mapped out what I thought the demand side, what COVID was going to look like from a monetary aspect as well as just a guiding principle. We do a business plan every 3 years. We just did one. In the trash it went, and we had to do another one. And so we have a fantastic team. So I called up our COO and said, all right, what do we have by way of any kind of plans? So we do have a disaster pandemic recovery plan. I was stunned. And it was, an insurance policy that basically gave us a few bucks for resources. It also gave us an employee assistance program. People wanted to see like debt relief or therapists. We triggered all of that. I'm thinking, all right, we have hundreds of offices now sprinkled about, apartments, homes. All right, how am I going to do this? I got logistical issues, confidentiality issues. People are freaking out. So what we did is we instituted every Friday firm-wide Zoom. And my wife and kids got COVID really fast, the end of March. And this is when people are they going to live? Are they going to die? Nobody really knew.
Right.
And I immediately instituted this. And here was the format. I said, look, everybody, I can't control the virus, obviously. I can't control, how that plays out. But what I can do is I can help a little bit, just a tiny bit, in giving you some reassurance that the firm isn't going anywhere. I'm not cutting salaries. I'm not laying anybody off. And remember, people were doing this back then.
Right.
And I said, and I'm gonna de-stress any financial concerns that you have. And this isn't like a promise for a week. I'm telling you, this is until it's over. We have no concerns. And then what I'm doing is every Friday, I'm going to do a firm-wide, anybody is welcome Zoom. And the format was simple. The economy, as I saw it through my lens, being fortunate enough to be on the Federal Reserve, law firm economics in this environment, the law firm's economics. I wanted to be extremely transparent. And then I shared personally about how I was doing, my wife and my 2 kids. And I did that to humanize it because everybody was sitting in this, light switch just went off, new experience that nobody knew what to do with. And that was great because it brought people together in a sense of community. Then I said, well, that's not enough. I mean, that's just one output. So I called up this company called Coaches USA, and I saw that they had a digital platform. And these are like, trainers and nutritional coaches for big multinationals. I said, look, I'm pretty confident you have a lot of trainers who aren't doing anything right now. You have a digital platform. How much would you charge me for 6 months worth of this? And they came back and said, well, we'll give you a proposal. And the proposal I got was $16 an employee. I said, a month. I said, done, we're in.
Yes.
So here's what I want. I want both. I want a nutritional coach for every employee, individualized, and I want a workout coach. So then what I did is I bought Fitbits for everybody. I gave everybody their coaches, and I bought them Fitbits, and I sent them out the next week so we can gamify it, so I can keep the sense of culture and community going. And we were doing lots of fun stuff with that. The next week I did is I sent them out yoga mats. I will be a little cheesy here and say, of course, it was branded Michelman Robinson yoga mats. But I sent it out, and I'm still doing my weekly calls. And then the next week, I sent out Kindles because I wanted to make sure that people understood it was more than that. You needed your mental sanity as well. And then the next week, we sent out Roku sticks because I didn't know what people could watch or not watch. And then we did a logistics team. We sent everybody their setup for their homes. What do you need? Chairs, ergonomic keyboards, everything. We just had them shipped. We had somebody going in because they were deemed essential.
Yeah.
And then the final part to that was not just the gamification, everything else, was we hired a production company to give people tips on how to work at home. Don't stay in nightwear. Go walk your dog once it started to open up. Take your breaks. Spend time with your family. And we went through this whole thing about this is what we really want you to do. And we went through COVID in that first 6 months. I think the team did a fantastic job. All of our, as a byproduct, it wasn't the goal. All of our numbers skyrocketed. Everybody was more productive. Client satisfaction was up. And I think it's because of the drive of the culture. And to me, it could have been this, batten down the hatches, lay people off, go into financial insecurity, and go into panic and fear. That's just not who we are. There's a problem, you solve the problem, and you go to the next problem. And that's our culture.
Wow. I've talked to so many leaders of both law firms and companies, and that's the best cultural leadership I've seen of anybody I've talked to during COVID. That's incredible.
No, thank you.
Absolutely. It's true. It's unbelievable.
No, I'll tell you, the firm is a very tight group. I'm saying at all levels. I'm not even just talking the lawyers. And that's the management team as well. So what we did during COVID is every day at 3:00, we had a standing call with our executive committee, our C-suite. And it was, what was the issue we had today? Are we going to face it tomorrow? How do we fix it? And what do we think we're going to face tomorrow? And that was every day. And the reason I share that, it's not just me. It's everybody coming together across the country and saying, what can we do? And I think that's what builds culture. It's not a top down, it's a bottom up mentality.
Absolutely. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was, now I do remember those first 90 days were pretty brutal. I was dealing with client stuff, the firm, Federal Reserve, we're having calls, trying to figure all that out. And there's a cute picture of me because I set up the office in my kids' playroom. They were a little bit younger, and there's this oversized bear sitting behind me, and there was a game table. My wife had pictures of the kids, and I'm going through PPP, and she took a picture and said, look, and sent it to all our friends saying, look at Sandy's new associate. It's this big bear up there. You had to have fun with it. And then, you just have to have fun in life. But those first 90 days, it was 20, I say it was, it wasn't 7 days a week. It was 8 days a week, 25 hours a day. And I was going pretty hard. It was around the 90th day. Everything started to settle down. I turned to my wife. I said, I'm going to have a drink because, it was like, I deserve this after 90 some odd days.
Yeah.
And I take a drink. I take a second drink. Next thing I know, I wake up and I'm going to, I clearly drank too much because I was like, I'm burnt out. My kids and my wife are on me. I don't know why I'm telling the story, but I'm telling it anyways. My kids are all over me, and I'm like, why are they clutching on me? And I go in the mirror and I look, and they were Drew all over me and took pictures with funny signs. I guess I tell it, you got a third, and a third. You got to have fun through all three.
Absolutely. That's incredible. How about, looking at opportunities going forward, what are some of the future trends, opportunities that you're most excited about right now, and maybe how are you positioning the firm to capitalize on those?
Yeah, great question. So, we're not a firm that looks at headcount. Again, it goes back to gaps and needs. I have a friend who's a partner at a big multinational, and when they broke 1,000, you might even know who I'm talking about. It was like a jubilee. They were like went this whole hue and cry about their
Uh-huh.
1,000 lawyers. I'm like, so you were bad lawyers at
Right,
999?
right.
Like, I don't really get it. So for us, it's gaps and needs, and what we're seeing in terms of opportunity is really not only just continued growth domestically, because we always have the growth, but international. And the reason we're going into London is we were just sending out so much work to local council that it became to the point where, all right, are we going to capture the value or are we not? And we decided we're going to capture that value. And to maintain culture, what we did is, I've been spending the year out there about a week a month with different people coming out because I want to, really understand the community and the people we're bringing in. Our goal was to start with 25 lawyers. We think that's a nice number, and it quickly grew to 68. And so we had to put a pause in it. Said we can't absorb all of that with support staff. It's too much culturally. So we're doing 3 rounds of hires,
Okay.
and we see that opportunity as being really good, especially with the way, the global economy is going. I do think you're going to see some more economic activity cross border. I think it's going to be a lot more robust than people think, especially when you start getting into, Africa, South America. I think
Uh-huh.
India is definitely underweighted in terms of potential. I think China will have some restrictions, but, a resilient economy for the most part, a little bit more
Right.
commodity focused. But there'll always be trade there. I think COVID displaced some of those supply chains, which will pop up in, some other areas. So we're constantly looking at that from a market perspective. In terms of what I think about in terms of the firm, well, I believe in succession pretty quickly. So after being managing partner for 10 years, I stepped down and Dana Kravitz took over as managing partner. He's, will soon be transferring that to somebody else. We've already made the shift to the younger partners to take over in those leadership positions. And I'm focused on training those individuals so that, they can carry on the firm in whatever direction they want. I think in terms of the opportunities, AI is extremely interesting.
Hmm.
I think today, everybody can read something and say, oh, that's AI. Today, it's a first draft. I call AI today just writer's block. It's a solution for writer's block.
Sure.
But I do think there'll be a day relatively soon that it will be greater than that. And the question becomes, how do you incorporate that into law in a way that you don't sacrifice skill or talent?
Hmm.
I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's interesting. I also think it's interesting on how to incorporate the speed in which training will happen for lawyers, because I think there'll be a seismic shift in this, 8 years to be a partner or 12, whatever your firm mantra is. What does that mean? And then do lawyers just become, instead of having these monolithic big law firms, do you go back to having a little bit more boutique because the access of information? Do you really need to have, 4,000 person law firm,
Uh-huh.
8,000 person, 2,000? I think it's interesting. Or do you go to the super specialized? So I think those are interesting things that we're keeping our eye on to see how that plays out.
Yeah, very interesting. How about talk a little bit on this show about just capitalism and living in a free market society? Maybe how is living in America and in a capitalist free market society benefited you in growing and scaling the firm and making the impact that you've made?
I can't imagine not living here. And I've lived in different parts of the world. I've actually lived in different countries multiple times. I love that experience. I'm a big travel guy. I travel with
Yeah.
my family all the time. But this country is extraordinarily unique, right? With all the, tumultuous, politics that can happen or whatever it might be, the pendulum's swinging from the right to the left. I don't think that's unhealthy. I think when it swings too far, it becomes unhealthy. But
Hmm.
that gets you to a point where you recalibrate.
Right.
Capitalism is part of that. And I think capitalism, while there's a pendulum to it, can go a little too far one way or the other. I think it's healthy because it allows you to innovate. And, when you think about antitrust monopoly. Google's just recently got, not
Right.
recently, they're back in the spotlight. People sit there and go, geez, that's wrong. It's such a great product. And I think about it this way. The law exists for a reason. Law is really to curb or to enhance policy or curb bad policy or bad actors. I'm not suggesting Google's a bad actor, but
Right.
things can morph into a way that are unintended. So
Hmm.
take somebody like Google. The ability for somebody to compete against Google is probably close to zero. It's
Hmm.
immaterial, which means you're stifling innovation, right? Google can innovate, but it's innovating against the backdrop of its own core products. It's
Right.
not going to disrupt itself. So as a result, the next version of internet search, if you will, and everything that means will not emerge if somebody doesn't feel that they can compete. I think capitalism is great, and I think the law, that's why I became a lawyer, wrapped
Hmm.
around that to enforce those principles, I think is fantastic. For me, it's great. I couldn't imagine otherwise. I was 29 when I started Michelman Robinson. I
Uh-huh.
was able to take a risk, calculated risk with Mark Robinson, and go out there and take harness what we thought was a good idea and test it in the market and tweak it and play with it until we got it right. And capitalism is great because it's immediate feedback. And what I mean by immediate, I don't mean like literally in a second.
Right.
Well, you're not getting clients and you got bills to pay. It's pretty immediate. So you'll shift and you'll pivot. And capitalism gives you that ability to do it.
Yeah.
Gives you a lot of freedom to innovate.
What, just talking about Mark, what was it about Mark that made you decide this is the person I want to, you brought him to the old firm and then made him decide this is who I want to, take out to lunch and or coffee and or just snag him out of the office because he won't go. What
Yeah.
what was it about Mark that made you want to be partners and launch this venture together?
So I knew Mark when I was at UCLA, my undergraduate. He was older than me. And we met through a common person, which we'll come back to in a second. And we became fast friends. And in fact, we actually lived together for a little bit
Huh.
before law school. And then he went to a different law school. And we were close and independent friends. And then when the opportunity came for him to join at the prior firm, I said, Mark, you should join and come on over. And, he's extraordinarily close. The person who introduced him to me was my sister. He used to be married to my sister.
Oh, wow.
And then, fortunately, unfortunately, depending on how you think about it, about a decade later, they got divorced. They still remain friends today. And,
Uh-huh.
obviously he's still here and everything's great.
Yeah.
Just, much a mature divorce, say it that way.
Yeah.
But that was the combination. And he, regardless of being once married to my sister, he and I became fast friends. Bright, even keeled, just a great person you want in the foxhole with you.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. How about looking back, any particular decision or action you'd say was proved to be most pivotal to your success thus far?
From the law firm perspective, I would say leaving the
Mm.
firm I wasn't happy at. I
Hmm.
could have easily said, geez, just bought my first house. My wife's pregnant. Seems like a lot of risk. And then confused risk with an obligation. An obligation isn't necessarily risk.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at this and saying, geez, if I'm going to define that as risk, then I'm going to be stuck here for 30 years. I actually looked at me being there as more risk. I wasn't
Uh-huh.
happy. The quality would drop. The senior partner would leave. Maybe I'd inherit something that I didn't particularly want, and I'd be stuck in something that would have caused me burnout or other outcomes.
Hmm.
So I think the greatest decision I made was to not confuse an obligation with risk and make that jump. Um, that was probably single biggest decision.
Uh-huh. How about any advice you'd give to, young lawyers or even young entrepreneurs that want to go, start their own firm or start a business? Any advice you'd give to just kind of aspiring entrepreneurial lawyers or entrepreneurs in general?
Yeah, I'd say entrepreneurs in general. I have the law firm and I have other business interests, other companies I've started and bought and sold because that's my passion is being an
Uh-huh.
entrepreneur. I think there's a handful of things. I think in no particular order, you have to have a strong value set for the business you're going to start. You mentioned FlyHouse beforehand.
Hmm.
So FlyHouse is my second aviation company. The first one I had, I ended up selling and disassociating with because I didn't particularly like the way it was being managed. When I got involved, I wasn't the founder. I came in when it was pretty early stage. I didn't like the alignment. I didn't think it was aligned at all. I thought it was all about how the company can make money and not stakeholder interests. It's a charter company, charters and owners and vendors. And I don't like that. I don't think that's right. I think it's a matter of when, not if, it implodes. And so I said, I don't like the way it feels. And instead, I said, I'm going to start something else. But I had to figure out what was the value set. Because if you can't figure out the value set, how do you lead and how do you ask anybody to sign on to the mission? It was pretty basic. It came to us pretty quickly. Safety, it's an airline.
Right.
Service, what I mean? You're throwing 10,000 bolts through the sky. Safety is kind of important.
Yeah.
Service, it's a high ticket item. It's private aviation. And transparency. That's the ethos. And so we set up our organizational chart just that way. A chief aviation officer oversees safety. Then we have our in-flight, that's service, on and off the plane. And transparency is financial. And so you want to figure out your value set, because that's a great way to think about every day. Are my decisions aligning with that value set? That's one. Two, you can't, I don't think so. You can't start a business with the premise of I want to make money, because nobody cares. It's not inspirational. It's not aspirational. Right. That's a conclusion to doing something. And then third, probably the most important, when I see people pitching me for deals or people are talking to me, is when they give me something, is this a solution looking for a problem? You got to identify the problem, and then you can come up with a solution. Every once in a while, I have somebody coming to me and say, yeah, no, this is the problem. I'm like, well, no, that's inconvenience. That's not a problem. And it's inconvenient to you, but there's a whole bunch of people that don't find it inconvenient. So I look at this and say, if you're looking at a marketplace, what am I solving for? So I'll come back to FlyHouse.
Yes.
So if you want to charter a plane today, you're a charter, you got to go to a broker, maybe a management company. There's no real regulation on disclosures. Broker says, okay, I'm going to go look, and the charter goes to the broker, says, I want a plane from, I don't know, Minneapolis to Florida. The broker says, all right, I'll Google this person. Looks like they can afford a pretty good plane. I'm going to up the price. Then I'm going to go call the management company. The management company's going to say, tell me about what you're looking for. Management company's going to say, geez, I'm going to get you a bigger plane, because the higher the type, the bigger the cost. And then tells the owner, because they just manage somebody else's plane, they're asset managers. So they got you a trip. Sometimes they don't even tell them the real price. And the owner who owns the plane and the charter who's contracting to charter the plane never talk and never meet. Cycles all the way back through that system. And then the charter says, fine. And you wake up one day and you find out the price is completely inflated. It's totally opaque. The parties to the contract don't even know the other one exists. It's a misalignment of interests everywhere. So what's the problem? It's totally opaque. It's not transparent. There's too much slack, which is another way of saying the communication loop is completely broken. And on the old company, I said, let's fix the communication loop. I had too much resistance. Why? They had a monetary interest to keep it broken. So that's why I said, I'll leave and do it. So what we did is we created a platform where a charter comes onto our system and they say, this is what I want. What I had previously just described could take 2 days to 2 weeks. Come onto our platform. They say, this is what I'm looking for. It takes all of about, 20 seconds. Then what ends up happening through our system, it goes directly to the owners through presets. We have an algorithm in the background, what they'll approve. And behind in the technology is a reverse auction to get to the lowest price. Still, safety rating has to be the same to even be in our platform. Goes back, and at the end of 3 minutes, the charter gets a plane selection, but they have 12 planes to decide from. The lowest in price and the lowest in type. Why would I want to set price? And why would I want to pick somebody else's selection? I don't know what they're going to do. By doing that, what I did is I created safety, service, transparency, our values. Now the charter and the owner are in the system in a transparent way. They feel good about it, and they don't have to worry about the slack. And that's how we did it. And so it's keeping that, identifying what's the problem and solving it. And we solved the problem of just an opaque, I would say, arguably some players pretty seedy. And we wanted to get rid of it.
Oh, that's excellent. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I've obviously looked into FlyHouse. It's incredible.
We're really excited.
Yeah.
When we decide, big player, top 10 player in the United States has 10 planes on their certificate to manage.
Uh-huh.
When the CEO, I chair the board, when the CEO, Jack Lambert, and I on January 31st said, hey, why don't we open the platform on February 1? And like opening the law office in London, I spend a year diligencing. I do the same thing on a product. I spend a year soft launching. I call it the apology tour. Jack calls it the solution tour. Because you don't know what you don't know. You want to test it. And we haven't spent any money on marketing, nothing. And I'm proud to say we've done, we'll do over $50 million in a soft launch with no marketing. But what we decided was on January 31st, we said, let's open up the platform. On February 1st, we were expecting 30 to 45 planes for the whole year. And Jack's texting me, oh, we have 6, we have 8, we have 10. And it was like the Jerry Lewis telethon, we joke. And after 8 hours, we had 293 planes. Market product fit was beyond our expectations. We had to push it back to May 1, and because we had to catch up. And as of today, I don't have the count right now. I think we are just about 1,500 planes in the US, a little over 200 in Canada. We're going to jump over to Europe, Dubai, Mexico, and Brazil because those are the hot markets.
Sure.
And by the end of first quarter, we'll be over 2,000, making us the largest for what we're doing.
Incredible.
Anyway, yeah, it's been an exciting ride. And again, it's the team and the cultures, right? It's just having the team and letting them do what they need to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I was going to say, I encourage all our listeners to check out FlyHouse. You can get it in the App Store on iPhones, and I'm sure it's in the Google and other or Android platforms, but it's incredible.
Sure. Yeah, it's great. We're really excited about it. And the whole idea is, how do we drive price down? So a lot of people think about the experienced flyer, the affluent person who either has a plane and it's in maintenance, or an executive. Yeah, that's great. It's wonderful. They're all welcome, of course. But the other side is, what about the non-experienced flyer, the 6 girlfriends that want to go away for the weekend, the bachelor party, the golf thing, the life event, whatever it might be, college touring, a wedding, a funeral. There's all these things that happen. I'm ignoring for a second what I call the YOLO, you only live once deal, like the golf and the caviar and the wineries. Forget about it. That's obvious. There's all these other things that happen in life that people might need it. Business urgency. Right? I got to get somewhere fast and I can't accommodate. A lot of people think private aviation is way more expensive than it is because of the marketing of, a bunch of people sitting there drinking champagne and caviar.
Right.
So I looked at that and said, all right, what's the problem? Problem is education, awareness, access, right? And control. So what we did is we said, all right, we're going to create a marketing campaign for, it's not my term, but I'll just say it, Henry, high earner, not rich yet. Okay. And we looked at that and said, okay, we're going to educate people that it's actually not as expensive as you think. It's not an immaterial spend. It is not cheap. I mean, granted, but you would ask people, we'd ask them in our focus groups, if you're going from Los Angeles to Vegas, how much does it cost on a one-way? $250,000. Well, that's not true. But they just didn't know. They didn't have the information. Right. You can get planes for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. For that kind of trip. And so what I did is I said, okay, education I got, that's our go-to-market strategy. But how do I solve the problem, even if it's too much for them at $3,000, $4,000? So we created Friend Share. And this is all our patent created technology. You go into our platform, and let's say it's you, me, and 3 other people. Well, I go on there and Friend Share pops up and you say yes. Well, I can put in the 5 of us just by going into my contacts or put in an email or a cell phone number. And then I can say, here's the percentage I want to pay, or in absolute dollars, however I want to carve it up. Now everybody is chopping, if you will, that plane. It's not sell by the seat because you have to get the whole plane, but I could do it that way. Everybody's included in the process, transparency, and then the system automatically handles the administration of that, which makes it more efficient, more affordable. And the reason I like that is, let's say it was a bachelor party. I don't know, I'm particularly picking this one, but I'm going to. And they want to go golfing in somewhere. Great. Maybe there's 10 of you and you want to get a heavier jet. I don't want to front it. I don't know if my credit card has room. All the excuses you can hear. Even if you're, affluent, maybe you just don't want to do it. You don't want to chase people. It's uncomfortable. You just put it under Friend Share and it goes out. And then you just chop the plane 10 ways. It's basically the cost of a expensive first class ticket,
Uh-huh.
but now you have control and you have a great experience. And that's one of the things that we did at FlyHouse. It's been a great ride.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's
Yeah,
very
and
good.
we formally launched in January. Still haven't formally launched.
Yes. No, that's incredible. How about we're coming up on our time here. Any other insights, thoughts, parting words you might have? This has been absolutely fantastic. So thank you.
Of course. I would say, look, for entrepreneurs in general, when you're looking at something, um, you know, be diligent, put your head down, work. I always think about things of test and tweak constantly. Everybody hears the stories. I think it was Hershey went bankrupt 8 times before, it came around and all the struggles. If you have an idea and you think you're really solving the problem, it's not a problem looking for a solution. Great.
Mhm.
When we started FlyHouse, it's entirely different from what the first business plan was. When Michelman Robinson started, completely different than what we thought it was going to be. Look at the data, trust your gut. Everybody's smart. I don't discount anybody. Test and tweak, or just pivot when you need to. And
Uh-huh.
just be diligent about it and have fun. Most importantly, have fun. So you're not having fun, it's not going to be good for any stakeholder.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, good. Well, Sandy, thank you so much. This has been absolutely a delight and informative and fantastic. So thank you so much for your time. And we'll share, your contact info and your info and socials and all that kind of stuff here in the show notes. But again, I just sincerely want to thank you very much for your time. This has been fantastic.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
you bet.
Excellent.